TxDOT making changes to stop harassment and discrimination among its workers. We break down the solutions moving forward inside this massive agency and what employees say still needs to happen.
Some days I get so angry with myself for not telling her to wear the seatbelt.
Click It or Ticket, the state safety campaign turns 16 this year. But is it working? We take an in-depth look at its effectiveness and what police say should be tackled next. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. The race for U.S. Senate seems to keep getting closer. A new poll released this week shows the tightest margin so far. The Emerson College poll puts Republican Ted Cruz just 1 point ahead of Democrat Beto O'Rourke. The poll of registered voters shows 20% still have not decided who to support. O'Rourke also made news this week by calling for an end to the war on drugs, saying it unfairly targets minorities in Texas. O'Rourke spoke at the state capitol at a rally for criminal justice reform. The rally marked the 55th anniversary of Martin Luther King's March on Washington. O'Rourke said marijuana laws unfairly hurt minorities in Texas.
I want to make sure that we, the people of Texas, lead the way in ending a war on drugs that has become a war on people, a war on some people over other people.
O'Rourke also said he wants the state of Texas to expunge the arrest records of everyone who's been arrested in the state for marijuana possession. Senator Cruz has criticized O'Rourke's views on drugs. Cruz has been running TV ads that tout his support of a law to require laid-off workers to pass drug tests to receive unemployment benefits. For some perspective, we're joined by Jim Henson from the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas, which conducts statewide polling. Now, we know there are a lot of changing attitudes about marijuana laws, but what do your polls show? Is this something that will truly hurt or help a candidate?
Well, it's hard to imagine that it's kind of a big game changer. The overall trend that we've seen is liberalization in attitudes towards marijuana that's happened more rapidly among Democrats than Republicans, but it's also happening among Republicans. People are moving on that issue, and I think that the discussion in some of the campaigns right now has been less about marijuana and more about using attitudes towards marijuana as something indicative of something scarier among Democrats.
This week we saw a new Emerson College poll that put O'Rourke within 1 point of Cruz. That's different than what we've heard before. How much can we trust that, and which polls should we even trust since they all say something different?
Well, I think what you do is you trust the range of them. I mean, you and I have talked about this before. The more polling, the better, and the best predictor as we get closer to the election is some kind of average of all of the polls. 1 point, the 1 point Cruz margin seems almost like, why would you bother? But it is meaningful, and it's really not that different from some of the other polls we've seen that have had this race in the range of 4, 5, 6 points. It's on the outer edge of that, and we'll see still more movement. The best thing about all of this is that there's a lot of people polling in Texas right now. It gives us lots of data to work with.
Cruz has compared O'Rourke's enthusiasm, the enthusiasm around his campaign, to Wendy Davis, who ran against Governor Greg Abbott 4 years ago, and she lost badly. What does that say?
Well, I mean, I think it says that the Cruz campaign is trying to send a message that they're not worried about this given the precedent. But the crucial difference is that by this time, in the 2014 cycle, Wendy Davis had been defined very negatively already. Her rise to prominence, in some ways similar to O'Rourke's and gaining a lot of national attention, but different from O'Rourke in that she rose through big political stories in the state that were very polarizing in the legislature, particularly abortion rights. O'Rourke is still, largely an undefined quantity for about half of Republican voters, according to our polling. So that's very different, and it's helping O'Rourke in the polling, and it's also informing the Cruz campaign strategy, as we've seen in the last week or two, and we're going to see much more in the coming weeks, particularly after Labor Day, as the Cruz campaign is trying to get the attention of Republican voters, define O'Rourke negatively, and remind them that Beto O'Rourke is, so anathema to what they're interested in that they have to remember to vote. The Republican strategy is we can rely on our structural advantage in the electorate in Texas, but Republicans have to turn out for that to work and for them to have kind of a hedge against a possible increase in Democratic turnout.
Heading into the home stretch.
the beginning of the home stretch.
All right, Jim, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Ted Cruz launches a new attack on Beto O'Rourke, claiming the congressman voted against aid for Hurricane Harvey victims. But is the ad true or just campaign hype? We'll put it to the PolitiFact Texas Truthometer test.
And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh wow, I had no idea that this was actually going on and this happened to other people. So it brought a lot of awareness. So I'm hopeful that people will come forward.
Changes to stop harassment and discrimination inside the Texas Department of Transportation after we started investigating. But workers say the agency still has a long way to go. Investigator Brittany Glass joins us for this special report next on State of Texas. One of the state's largest government agencies making changes.
No employee should ever feel, dread when they think about going into work.
Earlier this year, we first revealed around 200 allegations over the past 5 years coming from employees about harassment, discrimination, and retaliation inside the Texas Department of Transportation.
Cases going on. In fact, the more I complained, the more I felt retaliated against.
With more than 11,000 employees statewide, we've discovered a bulk of those complaints are coming from women, which make up just 22% of TxDOT's workforce, not on par with the state's greater workforce, of which women make up nearly half. TxDOT tells us it's making strides, hiring more women and minorities and also putting them in leadership positions. But we've continued to check in on that progress.
And we're discovering even more worker complaints coming in since our first report, and some women unsatisfied with the progress, leaving the agency altogether. Not long after Ramona Cruz started working in TxDOT Support Services Division last year, she says a male superior began to sexually harass her, giving suggestive looks and saying inappropriate things about women.
This is a culture that is accepted there. They know it, they continue to do it, and there's nothing that you're going to do basically to stop them. I'm ex-military, I'm a veteran. I've been around a lot of men. I was on a ship, the population was like 100 women to thousands of men, and they never treated me like that.
Those who have come forward with complaints are...
When Cruz saw our investigation, she realized she wasn't alone.
I had no idea that this was actually going on and this happened to other people. I think what happened is the newscast brought it to light again.
Within weeks, TxDOT's executive director appeared in a video sent to all employees.
I sent an email to all employees about recent news reports that questioned some of our employment practices. But as difficult as those reports were to hear, I look at them as an opportunity to help our workforce better reflect the people we serve. Harassment, retaliation, and discrimination have no place here. And if we determine that anyone employed here is guilty of those things, they will also no longer have a place here.
Cruz says following our report, these flyers went up in employee areas at her job site. They urge workers who've endured or witnessed any violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening behavior to report it. And these emails Cruz sent to the Equal Employment Opportunity Office show that's just what she did, multiple times. Still, she says it went nowhere, so she quit.
I felt it was that important to make a statement. I'm standing up for me, and I'm standing up for other women that are putting up with this sort of behavior.
In the few short weeks since our investigation, TxDOT workers' official allegations of harassment, sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation for this fiscal year alone nearly doubled from 29 to 52 statewide. That total's on track to break the record number of allegations reported in a single year in recent history across the agency.
Recent complaints include a woman's in Denton who says a male coworker showed her a pornographic movie, and a crew chief in Nolan County groping a female colleague. Agency records show recently in a few cases, complaints resulted in more training or reminders about professional standards. In other cases, suspects received a written reprimand, probation, transfer, or termination. But with the majority of complaints, TxDOT investigated but took no disciplinary action.
No action was taken in my event. Unfortunately, they don't practice what they preach. You shouldn't treat women like that. But again, I clearly wasn't important.
The same day we started asking TxDOT about the case, the agency's compliance division reached out to Cruz to say it was investigating her reported issues and would like her help in the process.
We are victims. We should be protected, not the people who do this to other employees.
TxDOT would not comment on Cruz's case. Remember, this all follows a legislative audit prompting TxDOT to improve its complaint process and add a division within Human Resources to specifically address such problems during employee orientation, with updated policies, procedures, and the process for filing complaints. In an email this week, the agency tells us we track all allegations and take each one seriously. If we're seeing an increase in people coming forward, they say, we view that as a positive sign. TxDOT says an investigation happens with any allegation, and if it is substantiated, action is taken.
Yes, but we know that last year, fewer than 40% of those allegations were actually substantiated.
But Josh, this issue goes well beyond complaints and allegations. Many women tell us it starts with hiring. We already mentioned the fact that women make up just 22% of the agency's workforce.
One of the questions we get is, aren't a lot of these positions just traditionally dominated by men?
Well, yes, but Josh, that's not always the case. Just look at the greater civilian workforce, where women and men are pretty equal in many of those jobs you're talking about.
All right, well, we have a whole breakdown of how TxDOT doesn't always stack up in those areas online, so check it out. We're also staying in touch with the members of the Texas House Transportation Committee who took interest in our investigation. This is the panel that's tasked with oversight of this agency, its practices, and decisions that could affect its budget in the upcoming legislative session.
It seems to me there's not a lot of concern about a person or the issue once the person has made a complaint. And perhaps this is quite discouraging.
Are these allegations and complaints something that you will be addressing in future hearings?
There need to be vast improvements in this area and benchmarks put in place, and not just put in place, but actually used in order to stamp out and to eliminate these kinds of problems.
Should Executive Director Bass answer for this?
I think so. He's head of it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And if the Executive Director cannot be able to fulfill these obligations, then he should step down and let someone else take that position who will.
We will continue to follow up ahead of the session. Remember, this is not just a story about men and women, it's also about racial minorities, and we will continue tracking the agency's progress with hiring and complaint issues in those areas as well. A new attack ad in the race for Senate is hitting the air in Texas.
Congressman Beto O'Rourke, so irresponsible that he even voted against Hurricane Harvey tax relief.
Ted Cruz accuses Beto O'Rourke of voting against aid for hurricane victims. But is the ad true or campaign hype? We'll put it to the PolitiFact Texas Truth-O-Meter test next on State of Texas. Little more than 2 months from Election Day, and the U.S. race for Senate continues to grab the political spotlight in Texas. The latest turn, Republican incumbent Ted Cruz says last year he voted for tax relief for Hurricane Harvey victims, but his Democratic challenger, Representative Beto O'Rourke, voted no. Here with the facts of the matter, Gardner Selby of the Austin American-Statesman, which since 2010 has been headquarters for the nonpartisan fact-checking PolitiFact Texas project. Welcome.
Good to be here.
So this claim was part of an online video ad that the Cruz campaign released. Let's take a look real quick.
Everyone doing their part, like Ted Cruz, who brought home billions in disaster relief and passed bipartisan emergency tax relief for those hit by Hurricane Harvey. Congressman Beto O'Rourke, so irresponsible that he even voted against Hurricane Harvey tax relief.
Now, that ad is referring to the Disaster Tax Relief and Airport and Airway Extension Act of 2017. There were 155 House members who voted against the measure. You guys checked the roll call, right?
Yeah, it's a simple click. Anybody could do it. We went to the roll call and we found that that O'Rourke was among 148 Democrats who voted that September against that act. That included the tax reductions for Harvey victims, or at least tax relief. 43 Democrats voted for it, including some Texans, Alan Jean Green, you might know, both of Houston, among them.
What did this act actually do for hurricane victims?
Few things showed up in a Houston Chronicle story, sort of TikToking it. It let victims access retirement penalties with retirement accounts without penalty. eased the write-off of damages, offered employer tax credits for hiring in places like Harris County that were hit hard by Harvey.
You spoke to O'Rourke's campaign. What did they say to these claims?
Well, they confirmed, yes, O'Rourke voted no on the on that measure. Chris Evans of the campaign reminded us that O'Rourke had earlier voted for billions of dollars, like most in Congress, billions of dollars in relief to the hurricane victims. Also, he had issued a written statement spelling out his reasons for his opposition, including that the extension of CHIP was not built into the legislation, Children's Health Insurance Program. At that time, it was kind of in limbo whether that program was going to be continuing.
So what is the rating on the PolitiFact Truthometer?
Our editors found this statement mostly true. Why? Well, he certainly voted no on the tax relief legislation, but the idea or the insinuation that he was against everything, he also voted earlier for billions of dollars in direct relief, and he had some reasons for opposing the relief legislation.
Thank you very much, Gardner. You can follow the PolitiFact Project on Twitter at PolitiFactTexas. You've heard it 1,000 times, click it or ticket, but is the statewide campaign truly saving lives? We break down the numbers, giving you an in-depth look at its impact, straight ahead on State of Texas. Earlier this year, our investigation took a closer look at the Texas Department of Transportation's No Refusal campaign, questioning the effectiveness of a program meant to get drunk drivers off Texas roads. The program is funded through a combination of federal, state, and local dollars, and years later, the answer to just how effective it really is not totally clear. But with Labor Day weekend upon us, we wanted to examine another well-known program aiming to keep you safe on the road. Click It or Ticket, a 16-year-old program in Texas. The numbers show is working. Today, more people are wearing their seatbelt than before the program started, from about 75% back then to almost 92% now. Investigator Kylie McGivern has the breakdown. Kylie.
We all know wearing a seatbelt saves lives. But our latest analysis shows the amount of tragedies behind not wearing a belt in Texas is dropping. The numbers are down compared to the same time last year. As of this summer, we're up to 612 deaths and more than 1,200 serious injuries from crashes where people did not wear a seatbelt. Crashes like the one involving Caitlin Fowler, whose family now hears this alert in a whole new way. On I-35, one of the busiest and most dangerous highways in the state, a reminder to buckle up. But in Troy, where life moves a little slower, Caitlin Fowler's family has this.
It's just always a reminder.
A crash site no longer marked by caution tape, but memorials and remnants from the night that shattered a family. Reflectors now serve as a warning Christine Mercer's daughter and her friends never had.
She came around a little too fast and hit that concrete, and when she did, the car went airborne and then it hit the tree.
Christine's 17-year-old daughter, Caitlin, and another passenger thrown from the car.
Her friend was able to get out of the car. She was the only survivor, and she was wearing a seatbelt.
Caitlin was less than a mile from home that October night in 2016.
I told myself I wasn't gonna cry, but it's not easy at all. It's like all the memories just come back, and all the dreams are gone. All in like less than a second.
Better known as Katie Bug.
This is her smile that she always has.
Caitlin would have graduated high school this year.
Every night I take a shower, I just cry. So the kids don't see me, but she was my only daughter. Some days I get so angry with myself for not telling her to wear the seatbelt.
Caitlin's life, an example of those recognized when hundreds of pairs of shoes were laid out to represent the lives lost in Texas over the past year. In the capital city, officers like Austin Police Sergeant Michelle Aparicio enforced TxDOT's 16-year-old Click It or Ticket campaign.
I see the increase of saving lives versus what I saw before this inception of the program.
Taking a closer look at the numbers since 2010, we found deaths related to not wearing seatbelts rose by about 7%, and the number of serious injuries went up 2%. But to see the real success, you have to consider those increases are much lower than the number of people on the road today. In that time, the state's population has increased 12%, outpacing the statistics for these types of crashes.
Jumped over a culvert and then hit a rock wall and flipped one time.
I think the education that TxDOT has done, with APD's done, with our our initiatives that we've done with our officers and going out and writing tickets, For those violations, I think people see that, you know, Texas takes this very seriously.
To keep improving, Sergeant Aparicio says she'd like to see more tie-in with other safety campaigns.
We also should be focusing more on the click it or ticket at the same time that we're focusing on the drinking and driving campaigns.
A thought Christine echoes.
It's a storm the other night, so it got real dirty.
Which is why she wanted to bring us to her daughter's final resting place.
This is it. And a lot of times people don't show that. They just show what happened or they tell what happened, but they don't see where we have to go. Like, this is it.
Now she's telling anyone who will listen, wear your seatbelt.
We paid the ultimate price, and we don't want to pay that ultimate price again. And I don't want families to have to pay that ultimate price to understand that it does happen.
TxDOT tells us it's always focused on improving roadway design and construction to be more forgiving for human driving error. But at the same time, it's up to drivers to follow the laws and make the roadways more safe for everyone. When you're out this weekend, no, not wearing your seatbelt could cost you up to $200. But as we just saw, the real cost could be even greater. Back to you.
Thank you, Kylie. That is our show. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.